blade plastic and quote unquote, sadly, LA. Like there's too much of this transactional relationship stuff going on, and just to realize that people are humans, that they have their own dreams and hopes and people to take care of and their time. I think you just need to respect people's time and not launch into what you need, want, but also just realize that people aren't there as a machine to get you where you need to be. But it is just better to help each other and, help each other forward and upwards instead of trying to stomp each other down or think that people are disposable.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I want to end with is you do a fantastic job sharing your ideas and your work and samples of your work on your website, which you said earlier, and I'll have you leave with. But I think that if I were to encourage filmmakers listening to this to do one thing, I'd say to look at your website and to really take notes about how transparent and how much you're sharing of your work, because a lot of people love to keep their work close to their chest and what have you, which I think is fine, but your way in, the way in which you see your ideas and the way then you express your ideas, I think is wonderful. And I think a lot of filmmakers should take note of how you're doing that. And I hope to encourage them to do the same.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And you're too kind. I really appreciate that. And I absolutely believe in that too. When I first came to Los Angeles, people were very, they seemed like they didn't want to share, but I'm the opposite. I think the more you share, the more goes around, the more opportunities you can all have. I'm very much into being like an open source kind of person, or encouraging people to create things, or knowing what resources I used if they want to, have a pitch deck that looks a certain way, or, just whatever can help people make more things. And then we'll all have more chances to see better stuff, because I think that, hiding it or hoping that people don't get on certain levels is not going to help anything. But so I'm glad because I'm always open to critique too of my work, my log lines or my pitch deck. So I do throw a lot of things on my website, or show people how I got to places, or I'm not traditionally trained in much of anything, honestly, but I've gotten opportunities to learn, or created opportunities to learn. So I'm really glad to create more of those opportunities for others.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right. So the next filmmaker that I invited to have a conversation with is a director that I've worked with a couple times now, Tom Wong. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us about the work you do.
Hi, my name is Tom Wong. I'm a indie filmmaker. I have written for TV for a while, and I just started making independent feature films. My last film is called Find Me. It's about a guy chasing a girl through national parks across the West that did really well on Amazon Prime. Featured a very diverse cast, which is important to me, and is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, so people seem to like it. And now I'm finishing up a film called Dealing with Dad, about a Chinese American family dealing with a depressed dad who's kind of a jerk. It's actually nicer depressed than well. And so that'll be the next feature coming out. We'll be hitting the film festival circuit in 2022, and then hopefully doing a release. And both films were cast by Shiree here, which is why we've worked so well together. So that's me.
Awesome. So our first question is, I'd love to hear about who your role models were in Hollywood. Like, it could be in Hollywood, it doesn't have to be in Hollywood, but when you're growing up, who were your role models?
I think that was, as a kid, it was tough. I don't know if I really had any role models, because there weren't any whole lot of Asian Americans out there as far as what I looked up to. When I grew older, like in high school and in college, some role models were more based on the kind of work they did, like James Brooks, who made this film Broadcast News. He's also a big television person, but people also probably know him as one of the producers of The Simpsons. But he made a few films that really affected me, and another filmmaker named Barry Levinson. I really looked up to, great director at that time. And so growing up, I started seeing all these filmmakers who made films about character films about people that I felt were very real, and were also trying to say something in their films. And I think that really that hit me, that if I wanted to ever make movies or write, that I wanted to make something that actually was trying to say something. And it wasn't until after college that I realized that, part of what I wanted to say is that, like, one of the things I want to say is that, America is diverse, and, not everybody, as Hollywood was being portrayed at the time, is white. And so that became one of the things that I tried really going for the films that I made, and the scripts that I wrote, was make it as diverse as possible, and trying to tell those stories, those kind of American stories. And it's still something that I'm going for today. But then, lately, seeing all these other diverse filmmakers do really well and make really great stuff, helped me to see that, that I'm not the only one out there that's doing that, and there are a lot of people out there doing great things. And so it's really encouraging and inspiring to see.
Awesome. So when and how did you decide to become a filmmaker?
I think I actually started out wanting to be an actor coming out of high school. And I went to UCLA. And at the time when I went, UCLA was still pretty primarily Asian. But I went to, the only really thing they had going as far as like casting things was something called the One Acts. They have these series of One Acts plays that the theater students put on. And I went to go try out for roles, and I realized that there were no roles for me. Even though our school was probably 60% Asian, there was maybe like one or two roles that were specifically looking for Asian American, and they were really small roles, or there were roles where I would be playing a girl. It just wasn't anything, anything that just was me as an Asian American. And that's when I realized that, like, oh, if I really want to get into this business, I probably have to create roles, the roles that I want to see. And so at that point, I switched from being an econ major to a creative writing major and started writing. And then after I got out of UCLA, I realized that I really wanted to make movies, not just write them. And that's when I applied for film school and got into Loyola Marymount University's film program. And I did my grad work there. But it was primarily is that, I decided I really wanted to make movies. And then the other part of it was just, I realized that, if I wanted to make movies with roles that I wanted to see, I'd have to make it myself. So that was the reason.
Got it. So one of the big conversations I think a lot of people like to have is around casting, and specifically around casting different Asians or Asian Americans into roles that aren't necessarily portraying their like ethnicity. So for example, casting like a Chinese American actor to portray a Korean American actor, for example. I'd love to hear how you think about that as you approach your projects, and how you go about casting your films.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have different opinions about this, and I wouldn't say that there's like really a wrong or right answer. I think it depends on what people feel comfortable with. I mean, for me, I see casting for this kind of thing really depending on what the role is. If the role is someone that is Asian American, and it's not really tied to their ethnicity, because I really feel like I'm an Asian American. I was born in America. I was raised in America. I think that my parents have this immigrant past that, like, I obviously helped form who I was, but essentially I was raised an American, and I consider myself an American just like anyone else in America. And so, I think that culturally that's who I am. And so, if I have roles that are Asian American that way, that's not really tied to their ethnicity in some way, that they are just Americans, or dealing with some sort of, story that deals with them just being an American, then I'm I'm pretty cool about just casting a Japanese American or Korean American to play a Chinese American. If they're it's really about the talent that they get the character. Because I think the Asian American experience is something that's shared by all Asian Americans, as opposed to being the just the Chinese American or the Japanese American experience, for example. So in that case, I'm fine with casting an Asian American that fits the character of the role. There are specific roles that I have for my films that are like it's an immigrant Chinese person who is from from China, or was raised in China and came to America. Those I think are I get a little more specific in trying to cast someone that is from that immigrant background, because I think that's important because that's part of the character's life and their story. And also, a lot of times they have them speaking their language, their homeland language, and so getting that somewhat authentic is important to me, even though probably 75% of people that are watching don't know if it's what language they're speaking. That's still important to me because that I think it brings a lot of this authenticity to the character. So in those cases, that's important to me. And I also think that just this as a preference too is if someone is half Asian, half something else, if the role calls for that or a role is specific for someone who isn't half, then sometimes that's something that comes into play for me as well. And just certainly I have roles of characters who are specifically half. And so I think that especially for a character that specifically cast as half and has some stories surrounding that, I think that having an actor who is half Asian, half something else, I think that's really a huge thing for that actor to understand from that perspective. So yeah, that's basically my feeling on that.
Okay. And so last is, do you have any advice that you would like to share with young Asians and Asian Americans who are wanting to break into Hollywood or just break into filmmaking and storytelling?
I think, yeah, I think the key thing for me is, just do something. I think a lot of people like to talk about either, writing or directing or acting, and just complain about things, but don't actually do it. I think that the first thing you got to do is before worrying about breaking in or being breaking in a certain way, is that you need to make sure that you are actually qualified to do it. And I think that the only way you can really do that is by doing what you think you're doing. A long time ago, I interviewed Rob Reiner, who was he's a writer, director, actor who he made like The Princess Bride and a bunch of other great films with Harry Met Sally. And I asked him the exact same question, like, what do you recommend I do if I want to become a filmmaker? And he said, go write something. And he walked away. And at the time I was like annoyed by that, but then looking back at it now, I mean, that's exactly what you need to do. If you want to be a screenwriter, you got to write a script. Write a script and make it the best you can. If it isn't great, like, go to the next script, write another script. If you want to be a director, especially now with all the tools that people have to make films that are easily accessible, make a short film, make something. And if you want to be an actor, get trained, go to acting school or get an acting coach, go audition for things, get into things, build a body of work, and then you can talk about like, what's the best ways to break in. But I think it starts with like, trying to be the best filmmaker, actor, or whatever first. And then there's a lot of ways to find your way into it once you show that you have talent.
Mm-hmm. Great. So last thing is, where can people find you? How can they track your work? How can they keep tabs on your upcoming film, Dealing with Dad? Tell us all the ways to follow you. And
okay. Well, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Tom Huang Film. That's TOMHUANG Film. I don't really keep up with that much, but it does update people on things who are curious. I also have a website, ctomgo.com, seetomgo.com.